Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reliability Matters podcast. For those of you who are counting, this is episode number 153. If you're part of the electronics industry, you've likely encountered the role contract manufacturers play, and it's a critical one. These specialized partners bridge the gap between design, innovation, and full-scale production, bringing efficiency, expertise, and flexibility to the table. As companies seek to meet growing demand for advanced electronic products, contract manufacturers are increasingly relied upon to provide cost-effective, high-quality assembly services. Whether it's managing supply chains, ensuring compliance with industry standards, or accelerating time to market, their contributions have become indispensable. In today's episode, we'll explore how contract manufacturing works, why it's so vital, and what trends are shaping the future of this essential industry. To explain all of this, I invited Adrian Leal onto the show. Adrian serves as the USA Business Development Manager for Teltonika EMS and is the president of the Houston SMTA Chapter. With over 30 years of experience in the manufacturing industry, he has worked extensively as both an end user and a service provider. Throughout his career, he's held diverse roles, including process engineer, manufacturing engineer, quality engineer, field engineer, and sales engineer. In 2003, Adrian became the first engineer from the oil and gas industry to earn the prestigious Process Engineer certification from the SMTA. For those of you who are in the Texas area, you may know Adrian as an ambassador for the Cup of Joey networking group. If you didn't know Adrian before, you'll get to know him when I return in just a moment. Stick around.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Hi, Adrian. Good to see you again.
Hey, Mike. Same here.
I think the last time we physically saw each other was a year or so ago in Texas. I think I was speaking at one of the, would that have been Houston or Dallas?
That would have been Houston. Yep.
Yeah,
we were
okay.
in Houston for the SMTA Expo we had back in March.
Right. Yeah, you were busy shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all the things a chapter officer would do.
Yep. And then we had a good time at the Houston Rockets games afterwards.
We did. That's right. I forgot about that. We met the cheerleaders. Well, I should say the players, and then the cheerleaders, and all of that. Yeah, it was a good time. It had great seats.
Sure was.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm not even into basketball, and all of a sudden I'm a fan. You know. But once I stepped foot into that stadium, through who knows what technology, I get all these emails, promotional emails now from the Rockets. And I'm like, I'm in California. What am I going to do with that? But anyway, it was worth the price for sure. So since we've seen each other, you've made some career moves.
Yes, I have. Yep.
You went from one side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle.
I sure did. Yeah. So
you went from a manufacturer to a contract manufacturer.
Yeah.
A gun for hire.
Gun for hire, exactly. Yeah. I was approached by a European EMS contract manufacturer out of Lithuania, Teltonika EMS, and they're looking to get their foot in the door in the U.S. market. And so they approached me, and I gave them some ideas of how to enter this market. You know, it's a little bit it's a little bit startup, a little bit existing company. So you have a company that, you know, has a global footprint and has several divisions, which is very appealing to me because they have divisions, EV chargers, medical devices, routers, GPS-based sensors, IoT sensors. So they use that to springboard for the contract manufacturing. So I joined them in August, and we've been just full speed ahead. So I have there is one other gentleman that they hired Tim McGuire that covers the Northeast, and so he and I are charged with bringing Teltonika to the U.S. for the first couple of years, and then hopefully we will find some more people to join the team, and we'll cover the entire continent.
Is it eye-opening to work on one side of the aisle and then suddenly become the vendor that you're used to negotiating with and arguing with and pleading with?
A little bit.
Did that open your eyes a little bit?
Well, I kind of been in this situation before. Years ago, I was with Schlumberger, which is now called SLB, and I had several roles there. And one of my favorite roles there was as a supplier quality engineer. And so I was tasked with helping the suppliers that we engaged in improving their quality metrics. And so I had the attitude that, well, if they were approved to be a vendor, they bring value to the table. So I looked at it more as a partnership, and that was a little bit disturbing for a few people. Like, no, we're doing this. No. We're doing this. We're going to do this. And so we're the 5 vendors, critical vendors that I was assigned to. We were very successful in reducing waste and increasing their efficiency and improving their quality metrics. So so even though I've been in the manufacturing and been a part of a company that sold product, and then being part of a company that provides the end user product, to me, you're at the same table. Just you're providing a different tool set.
Yeah, I can't let something go. You talked about Schlumberger, now known as SLB. Oh my gosh! I thought you said SOB, and I'm like, should we tell them?
No, they use their stock market acronym to shorten it. So, which some people like it, some people didn't like it. Some people like the old school. They like the Schlumberger name because it's actually a family name. It was the 2 Schlumberger brothers who started the company, and there's actually still some of their their grandchildren are still around. So.
Well, I feel a little bit duped because after all the years it took to be able to correctly pronounce Schlumberger, now all of a sudden it's a different name. Oh well, so goes our industry.
Right.
Let's talk about contract manufacturing for a bit. There are several tiers of contract manufacturers. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Just out of curiosity, I don't want to make this all about the company you represent. It's more about the generalities of contract manufacturing. But what tier would the company that you represent be associated with? Are they a tier 1 or are they somewhere down the line?
I would say we're mid-level. So we're not going to be, we have the capabilities to do the mass production of consumer devices that you see that usually come out of the Far East. But because of the diversity of our expertise, we can do, if the fit is right, we can help a startup, but because, like I said, we have the expertise in other industries, those quantities are going to be lower. Example, you might not see the quantity of medical devices that you would see in IoT sensors. So, but we have 6 SMT lines, and they can be set up, for a variety of quantities, and with a huge staff of I think over 800 people, we can flex as need be.
Interesting. And normally, when I think of contract manufacturers, of course, there's several here in the U.S. There's a gazillion of them in Asia. There are many in Mexico. I'm probably just a little bit ignorant on this, but I wasn't aware of I shouldn't say any, because clearly Lithuania is not a small country, but I wasn't aware of a Lithuanian contract manufacturer coming to the U.S. Are they one of the
Yeah,
first within their country within that field?
I I want to say if they're not the only one, they are the first. So, but you and I both know that manufactured products out of Europe have a very are of high quality and are very reliable. And so um, when the company decided to launch their contract manufacturing division, it was very easy for them to do that because they're already making devices for their other the divisions that are used all over the world. So I think there's other contract manufacturers in Europe. There's actually in November they have their version of Apex called Electronica, and supposedly it's the premier electronic manufacturing expo for Europe.
Interesting. Let's because you came from the other side, and OEM side, and others. Let's talk about transparency. We hear the term transparency all the time, but in the context of the relationship between a manufacturer or an OEM and a contract manufacturer, how does transparency in the manufacturing process impact trust and long-term partnerships between OEMs and contract manufacturers? Again, you've been on both sides. So
Yeah, no, it's very important. I mean, you have to, just like any relationship, communication. So, if you are a contract manufacturer and you come to an agreement with your customer, your client, you're going to want to provide them as much information that they're going to ask for. I mean, have an open door. Invite them to observe the processes that are going on, and invite them to have monthly sit downs face to face. Yeah, we can Zoom or Teams or Google Meet all we want, but sometimes that the interpersonal connection is missing from those virtual communications channels. So, but when you invite the customer to your site and they see the people who are diligently working on your product, and you watch how much care or lack of care there occurs, you get an impression. So one of my roles over the years, I was an ISO certified auditor, so I would audit processes, and so many times, not only internal or external, when you hear the word auditor, everyone goes on lunch break or coffee break or smoke break because
right,
they don't want to talk to you, right? And
right.
so
Well, your job is to find something wrong. That's what you're looking for.
right. Yeah. So, so I've been an auditor and I've been audited. And so, and during those processes, I look for transparency on both ends. If I'm going to be audited, sure, I can prepare for the audit, but I want the auditor to come in and I want him to try to find something, because at the end of the day, he or she is there to check our processes, check our people, check our machines, and to make sure that what we say we are doing it. And so if you try to hide something, if you try to not be forthcoming with all the details, that affects, you can imagine, like, for example, I'll go back to the oil and gas industry. Years before, right now, electronics, everything's oil, everything is lead free, but electronic assemblies and circuit board assemblies for the downhole industry were lead free long before it was required, not because of the environmental issues, but because the lead free solder had a higher melting point. So you have to have the contract manufacturers that we engage, one of the things that I would look for to make sure they had a process where they isolated their lead-free solder from the eutectic solder and from actually another solder, an HMP, high melting point solder, which had like 85% lead. And the reason you want to make sure those solders were isolated from each other, if you had any kind of cross-contamination, it would affect the melting point of that solder joint. If you had 1% of lead in a lead-free solder joint, especially a surface mount joint, when that board was exposed to high temperature of the oil and gas downhole environment, those components can fall off. And also, if the HMP solder, which had 85% lead, if it was exposed to any tin, extra tin or extra silver, it would drop that solder point, melting point. So you had to, the melting point for HMP, I think, was 299C. The melting point for lead-free, 218, 221, somewhere around there. So depending on the application, most lead-free assemblies for downhole, they were qualified for 150, 175C because you'd always want to make sure that you were conservative. But if you had a component, again, back then, we had to literally wash the leads of the components of any eutectic plating because we had to get that lead off of there. And if a contract manufacturer did not follow that process and put down a component through hole or surface mount that had some lead on his plating, and if it got on a board that was a lead free, that one part would fall off. And I'll give you an example.
Well, it's really important that if there's 100 parts on the board that go down the hole, 100 parts come back up, right?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
want to bring up 85 parts.
Yeah, there was a board that that I had was building. It was so one of my roles at Schlumberger, I was in charge of the prototype lab, and so we had a board that we built and sent it off to be evaluated. The project manager came back and he was very upset because 2 or 3 surface mount components came off the board at temperature, and he accused the lab, our shop, of using eutectic solder on his board. And you and I both know you cannot, if it's surface mount, you're going to go through the reflow process. You're not going to just reflow with one type of solder and then reflow 2 or 3. We're like, no, that was impossible. There was no way we could have had, 3 of those resistors or capacitors. One was soldered with just, eutectic solder, and everything else was. And there was no rework on it. And so we were going back and forth trying to do a failure analysis. Luckily, my neighbor down the hall heard the conversation, and he walked out. He goes, "Wait a minute, is this board XYZ, whatever it was?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I did a thermal scan of that board, and I can almost guarantee that resistors 24, 25, 26 are the ones that came off." I'm like, "Well, yeah, how'd you know that?" Well, there was a through hole inductor that was a heat source. So this board was already at its limit as far as temperature. This inductor was generating heat, and the combination caused the internal connection of that device to drip lead down the lead and expose it to the other components. So
wow.
In that case, the process was followed per the instructions. However, the design rules were violated.
Well, ended up going down the hole and tinning other components.
Yeah. So we had to make sure they had to go back and redesign everything to consider not only the environmental temperature, but the temperature generated by the board itself.
If I were looking to choose a contract manufacturer, what are some of the, from your experience, what are some of the red flags that I should look out for?
you want to look. For me, it's been my experience. Like I said, I'm being on both sides of the table. Um, a big concern would be if they have a high turnover on their employees. Whether that's something that naturally occurred or for some reason there's some internal strife. Uh, the reason that's an issue for me is that because that means the team that's working on your devices may be new, and so you want to make sure you have a team that's qualified and experienced building your board. Um, you also want to look at the quality metrics, not just for your device, but for all their devices, for on-time delivery, first pass yield, returns, vendor at fault defects. All those quality metrics will give you a good indication of the level of competency that you have when you're engaging a contract manufacturer.
How important is it to align the contract manufacturer's experience with your particular application? For example, if you're a medical device, if you have a implantable defibrillator that you're trying to bring to market, do you need to look for contract manufacturers that are heavily experienced in medical electronics, or can a generic contract manufacturer that knows how to put components on circuit boards properly and efficiently, can they do it?
Yeah.
In other words, how much nuance is there in the difference between medical and automotive or flight or consumer and things like that?
Well, the kicker there is that for medical devices, if it's implantable, you have to have a certain ISO certification. If the device is going into space, you have to have that certification. So while you may have a very good contract manufacturer who knows what they're doing, they have a great team, if they don't have that ISO certified, you can't use them. So now you can probably, if you really like them, you can probably help them go through the process of getting that certification. However, that's going to take time. You're going to have to, again, it's all the documentation. You're going to have somebody come in to an ISO auditor who's going to check all of that. And that takes time. You're going to have to prepare for the audit. Then you have to get the audit done, and then you have to have the follow-up. So, if you're going to have a medical device that's implantable, you're going to have to make sure they have the required ISO certification. And here in the U.S., you have to have also, the FDA approval of existing devices. So, in oil and gas, which is an extreme environment for electronics, there's not a specific certification for that, but you will look for, ISO certification 9100. You do want to make sure that anyone who is building your devices, they're building to SMTA, IPC 610 class 3.
Now I'm 100% on board with. I have this kind of skeptical, maybe it's out of naivety, maybe out of ignorance, but I have this kind of skeptical view on ISO registrations, and that is that let's compare an ISO specification or standard to an IPC one. IPC 610, 001, all those. You get certified to those. It's black and white, right?
Right.
The fillet must look like this. There must be,
yes,
X, no more than X amount of voiding from a percentage standpoint. I mean, it just goes on infinitum, right? I mean, there's so many black and white standards. This is good. This is bad. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian. ISO is more like, I'm going to build products that are okay, as long as I state what my intentions are and carry through those intentions.
Yes.
I pass an ISO audit, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
put
good.
In my documentation, I'm coming today and I'm wearing yellow socks and I will have a blue hat on and I will be, whistling, hi ho, off to work I go while I build your boards. By God, if I get audited, I better be doing that.
Yeah, you
It's
better
in
not
my
be singing another
documentation.
song. Right, right. So just the fact that ISO alone doesn't carry a lot of weight unless your ISO standard says that you will comply with 610 or
Right,
whatever, right? Then
right. For our industry, I agree. Yes.
if you can anchor ISO into a not a relative standard, but a very specific, hardcore, black and white, non-negotiable standard,
Yeah.
like IPC provides, and others, then ISO makes all the sense in the world. But
Right.
I always chuckle a little bit when they go, "We're ISO registered." I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because
Yeah.
ISO for you could be different than ISO for them, and things like that.
I had a supplier that was that we were required to do annual ISO audits, and they refused to be certified by ISO. However, they knew the ISO criteria, so every time I would go and do an ISO audit, it was like, okay, do you have certification? Question number one, no, you do not. But questions 1 through 75, they passed because everything required, they had it, and their traceability was unmatched by any other supplier that I had at the time.
Right, right. That's the difference between ISO and other standards. Other standards, you know what they say they're going to do. ISO is what do you say you're going to do? A little bit different.
Yeah. So so the IPC, mil spec, all of those are very industry specific that we can lean on and call out.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
In today's age, this is probably an important question. How should companies assess a contract manufacturer's financial stability and scalability to handle future growth or unexpected challenges? And I think that question is particularly important if the contract manufacturer is located, on another continent or, a geographic distance away. You can't just drive by the parking lot and count the number of cars, right?
Right.
It's or do a Dun & Bradstreet report. I'm sure Dun & Bradstreet reports are probably good, but they don't have a completely inclusive global reach. So what's as a former user of contract manufacturers before you switch teams, how did you go about assessing that? If there wasn't a J-bill or a Celestica, which is kind of like duh, they're like almost too big to fail. Yeah. If it's a smaller company, what was in your bag of tricks to make sure that they're going to be here tomorrow?
What you were saying yesterday, and what you're saying earlier about the transparency, you're going to have to, if you're going to approach a contract manufacturer that's, low to mid volume, you have to, the engagement has to be, we're not trying to catch you. We're trying to bring you on board. So provide for us as much information as you can to make that onboarding process as easy as possible. So if, as a customer, I need to see financials, sign a mutual NDA, look at the last 3 years, look at, ask for, sometimes the other customers do not want to be broadcasted by the contract manufacturer.
Sure.
But, you can ask them, what is your, where are you capacity wise? What is your forecast for growth? What is your plan if the bottom falls out? Do you have, can you switch, can you shift gears and do something else that will allow you to ride out a storm of, say, in the energy realm, if you take away COVID, every 7 to 9 years, the price of oil will drop, and so the contract manufacturers that engage in the oil and gas industry, they have to be prepared for that. Like, okay, we're coming up on the end of that
cycle. Spend some time in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I think your point about capacity is well taken too, because if I'm about to introduce the latest and greatest tech device and I hire a contract manufacturer to build it, and I think this thing's going to explode, if they tell me they're at 97.5% capacity, I probably want to go to a place that's got a little bit of runway in front of them, right? Although I'm not sure how many contract manufacturers would even give that information away, but that's certainly a valuable piece of information.
Yeah, and the other question I would ask if you're engaging a contract manufacturer is the size of the other customers that they're engaging. If you if you have a contract manufacturer who has like one or two, we'll say they have, just for the sake of discussion, they have 10 really good customers. It's a mid-sized company, 10 really good customers, but two or three of them, or say two of them take up 80% of their production. So if for some reason, if those two customers, if their demand increases, where does that leave everybody else? Or, God forbid, their demand decreases and the company relied on those two customers to finance their operations. So now they have the capacity to build for the other people, but now how, are they financially stable to able to ride out the request of their larger customers and still provide for the smaller customers? So I know of one supplier back in the day that was a key supplier that the majority of their work was for one customer. And when that customer pulled out, they were focused on one industry. And when that one customer pulled out, everybody else was taken. So they ended up just closing shop and moving. They were based out of Oklahoma. They closed up shop here in Texas and just said, okay, well, we're just going to take our loss and, we're going to look elsewhere. So that's always a concern. If you have a contract manufacturer and they have, one or two really big customers that's take on, a lot of their bandwidth, be careful.
Again, because you have spent time on both sides of the fence, from your experience, what are the common mistakes OEMs make when either shopping for or contracting with a contract manufacturer? What are they not seeing? What are the pitfalls? What are the mistakes? What are the fails that can happen?
Not getting the entire picture, and not there's other two factors we haven't talked about is, if a contract manufacturer says that they're scalable and they have that they're not at capacity. Okay, so if they can increase their workload for you, what is their resource for workforce development? Yes, there's equipment that's pretty much automated, but you still have people on the floor. So if a contract manufacturer goes, oh yes, we're at 60%, and we have room to grow, the first question is, well, great. When you grow, who's going to run the machines? If they come back and tell you, I already have, say they have an internal training facility, or say they already have 2 or 3 schools that they can have a pipeline connected to them already, then that should give you confidence. But if somebody says, oh yeah, we're not at capacity and we're ready to grow, and you ask them, well, where are you going to hire your employees from, and they don't have an answer, then take a really good look at that.
Yeah. I particularly like the relationship with schools, local universities, local community colleges, things like that are a really good resource for technicians, operators, engineers, all the way up and down the line. As we approach wrapping up here, can you provide any examples from your experience in working with contract manufacturers on how a strong relationship with the contract manufacturer led to a successful outcome in terms of innovation, cost savings, production efficiency. How have you had experiences where they've come to you and said, Adrian, let's not do this, let's do that, and the voila, all of a sudden light bulb comes on and everyone wins. Has that happened in your world?
Yes. Again, going back to when I was a supplier quality engineer, and I really got to engage my suppliers. Once I was able to create an environment with my suppliers that I was assigned to, that I was not out to get them, that we were actually we were a team, and I gained their trust, and let them know that if there was ever a problem, I was not just focusing on them. I was focusing on the process or the product itself. And so there was two examples that come to mind. One where I had a supplier that provided for the company around the world, different locations, the same product, but different locations. United States, Europe, Japan. And every location, except for Japan, had good quality metrics. And so, and they couldn't understand why. They couldn't understand why was it that the product was received and had good quality metrics every place but this one location. So start to look at the whole process. Obviously, it was not a manufacturing process because the same batch of material, the same product was built in the same location by the same people, following the same processes, being delivered everywhere except one location. Well, it turned out that one location was using an outdated inspection criteria. So they were inspecting to an earlier revision of the document. Once they upgraded or were caught up with us and the other parts of the world to the inspection criteria, the defects went away. Well, they didn't go away. It's just that now everybody was being inspected and everything was being inspected by the same thing. So on paper, it looked like this company did some great thing and improved their quality. Well, it wasn't they improved their quality. The quality was always there. It was just that the reporting of the quality was now universal across.
They redefined what quality was. Quality changed. The expectation of the quality changed. The definition of it changed, and they were just looking at the old version of quality.
Right. And so, and the supplier was like, wow, so it wasn't our fault. It was your fault. I said, well, yeah, it was the company as a whole. We were not on the same page. And so, and that caused several people on both sides of the table to get some attaboys and some promotions out of it because we did our due diligence. I had another another supplier where, you would do, depending on what was called out for, you might do a, 10%, 5% inspection. And so this customer, this supplier got really good at what they were doing. Their defects were just, they did not exist. And so, and it was a legacy product being built years for years. And so they got to the point where they're like, okay, well, you know what? We're so good, we're going to ask for a waiver on our inspection. So the inspection criteria got even less. And so again, they're giving product go out the door. Product got shipped overseas, and it was an electrical mechanical product. And so when it got to the end user, there was some holes that were not tapped out. Matter of fact, the holes were only partially tapped out, and everybody stopped. It's like, okay, they had to do 100% inspection, and it turned out out of 100 pieces, there was, I don't know, 6 or 7 pieces that did not have these holes drilled through. And so they were ready to shut the supplier down. They were going to fly in from other countries to come do an audit. And I said, look, let me save you some time and energy. I said, this supplier is one of my suppliers. I said, I live 20 minutes from where they're at. I said, let me go do an audit. I would do, and I said, look, I'm a trained auditor. I will do my due diligence. I will look at it. And if I see anything that's of grave concern, I'll call you. I said, but do not get on a flight, travel across the world just to find us. So I called my counterpart, the quality manager in there, said, look, this is what happens, and let's take a look at it. He goes, okay, I got you, Adrian. He goes, I'm on it. So it turned out that and again, this goes to what we were talking about earlier about traceability. They had very good traceability. And so he was able to trace those assemblies by lot and part number, who touched it, when it was started, when it was shipped, even when the days, how long it took to build, and which step, like say day 1, it was, the raw material, day 2 was the cut-in, day, et cetera, et cetera. So on this particular month of manufacturing, there was construction going on the highway in front of the building. And the construction crew cut the power line to the building. And when that happened, the machine shops, all their CNC lathe and all the machines were in the middle of cutting. The power went off, power came back on, and the machine's brain, the machine's like, oh, well, I got through cutting, so I'm going to start the next hole. So it was mid-cut when the power got turned off. And so because they had asked for a waiver on the amount of inspection done at the end, usually I think it was 10%, then it went down to, 5%, whatever. Those 5% we didn't catch. I say we, the customer and the supplier did not catch those defects. And it turned out the fixturing for those devices made 3 at a time, and there was 6 that didn't have the hole complete. And so because that was an extreme. I mean, you think about, power's going to go off. Well, things happen, right? It's not something that you can control. So what he did on his end was he added a procedure that anytime there was, power outage or a brownout or anything that happened that affected the operation of the building, they would go back and they would verify all the equipment. They would take any product off, and so
anything on the machines at the time of that event is suspect, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything that, if they were soldering, anything that was at temperature and it stopped, they would go back and inspect those solder joints. Anything that was happening at that time, we had to go back to any kind of inspection. And then on our end, we went back to a wider range of inspection percentages to make sure we didn't catch it. Now, it delayed the incoming, but it made sure that we didn't lose any defects that slipped through. And that took us 2 weeks to do that, to from the first inspection to the investigation to writing the documentation to submitting the report. A couple of weeks. It would have taken 2 weeks just for that person to fly in from overseas, do the inspection.
You were able to jump to a conclusion. Yeah. I love foxhole stories, Adrian. Although I like them more when they're told at a bar over a drink, but next best thing.
Yeah.
We're out of time, but I do want to ask one question, completely unrelated to contract manufacturing. You and I are connections on LinkedIn, and I constantly see this cup of Joey. Adrian at this cup of Joey. Tell me what, I did allude to it in the intro, but tell me what Cup of Joey is. Who goes to these networking events, and is it primarily for our industry, or is it wide open?
It is completely wide open. So as you recall, and we all do that, during COVID, we were Zooming and teaming and, we were doing everything virtual. And so it came out of COVID and people wanted to connect in person. So a friend of mine, Joey Sanchez, and it's not called Joey, Cup of Joey because of him, but, here in the States, we call
Coffee,
Cup of Joe, right?
Right.
So at most coffee networks, we tell people what we do, So if it's a coffee network for our industry, I build boards. Oh, I sell solder. Oh, I sell chips. Oh, so it makes sense. But this networking movement, it's like we don't say what we do, we say why we do. So the Cup of Joe with the why. So
I wondered about that.
So now it's like, now the conversations take on, we say it's not transactional, it's transitional. So now we are engaging other people and we use LinkedIn, the LinkedIn app, which has a QR code for you to connect because people change jobs, obviously, right? So people will show up. It's a free program. It's a free event. We have one every Friday in Midtown Houston at a building called the Ion. It's an old Sears building that's now like a shared workspace, kind of like the epicenter of our ecosystem. And then it got so popular that Cup of Joey's started popping up around the city of Houston. So I host one down at the Space Center Houston Museum, which is across the street from NASA, from Johnson Space Center. There's one up in north part of town called the Woodlands. There's one in the west side in the Energy Corridor. These all happen once a month, but at different days of the month. There's one down in Sugarland, which is a really big industry hub. And then we have some every now and then. And then, people want to connect, not just during coffee. So, Saturday we went to the Houston Dash, which is the women's soccer team. Some of us went, got a cup of Joey and we connected there and we made some more connections. So you'll have people from manufacturing, you have people that do software, real estate, entrepreneurs, investors, startups.
Well, it sounds like a local chamber meeting without the business being the center of attention.
Right. And so the old guys like me, we almost turned into Yodas, they're like, okay, well, who do I talk to about getting some investors? Well, go talk to Jesse, well, who do I talk to about manufacturing? Oh, you got to talk to Adrian. Go talk to Adrian. So now I first started going to Cup of Joey to find customers because startups need help too. But now I don't go for customers. But it never fails. If somebody says, "Hey, will you come meet me at Cup of Joey? I have a question about manufacturing, about either it's if it's offshore, nearshore, or reshoring." I can speak to all three of those, and so I will talk to them. And then before I walk out, I've picked up 3 potential customers. Say, "Hey, will you build this for me?" And so, but Houston, our contract manufacturing community is small. We know each other, so sometimes the customer, I'll bring them on, and sometimes I'm like, well, I can do it, but it's going to take a while, and I'm probably going to be expensive for you, but let me send you somewhere else. And so, I call my friends over at PPSI, or I call my friend Mike Murphy at MilSpec. I know a couple of prototype shop labs here in town, and I call them up, say, hey, I got a buddy here that needs some help, and I can't do it. Will you take it on? And I don't get any money off of it. I'm just trying to help,
Sure.
help our local economy grow. And so that all happens at Cup of Joey.
Excellent. Well, thanks for filling me in on that. I pieced together it was some kind of networking group, but and I assumed it was something like a chamber of commerce or something like that. But it seemed a little different, and the fact that you were involved kind of led me to believe, it's probably a little different. It's probably not quite what I'm thinking. I like the twist on it, though. Adrian, thank you so much for being my guest today and
Absolutely.
shedding some light on your CM journey and the contract manufacturing industry in general. I wish you a ton of success with this new gig, and let's keep in touch, and I'll
Absolutely.
see how things are going. And go Lithuania.
Yeah, you go.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Adrian. By the way, for my audience, if you'd like to get a hold of Adrian, I'll put Adrian's contact information and email in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, when you get to a safe place, go to that podcast app, look at the show notes, and the information will be there. If you're watching this on YouTube, just somewhere down here, there's a More button. Click the More button, and you'll be able to see Adrian's contact information. So again, Adrian, thanks again for being on my show. It's always good to see you.
Same here. Thank you, Mike.
Well, that's another episode. Thanks for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on your favorite podcast app. If you're watching this podcast on the Reliability Matters YouTube channel, be sure to click the like, subscribe, and bell icons to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. A special thanks to the Printed Circuit Engineering Association's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating this show. Thanks also for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. I love to hear from you. Send comments or episode suggestions to Mike at mikeconrad.com. Just remember, that's Conrad spelled with a K. To learn more about the Reliability Matters podcast, please visit our website at reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening or watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and perhaps most importantly, keep doing it right. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.